Welcome back, everybody, to SJG Perspective. I appreciate you guys being here and watching my videos with me. Not with me, but for me, I guess. Today, I want to talk about the comparisons between transgenderism and transracialism, and how the transgender community seems to have a problem with the term transracialism, and how they equate that to transgenderism. They have a big issue with that. But before I do that, you'll see these links right. It's all opposite. No, there we go. You'll see these links right there on the screen. Those are some of my other media sites and some of my other social media accounts and so on and so forth. I'd love it if you guys went and checked them out and subscribed, especially to minds.com and bitchute.com. Those are two that I'm pushing probably the most. I'd really like it if you guys went and subscribed there and followed me. Anyways, transracial and transgenderism and the similarities I see between them, and how the transgender community doesn't see it quite the same way. Let me pull up the article we're talking about here. It says transracial is not the new transgender. Why race and gender are not synonymous. Well, this article basically talks about how Rachel Dolezal, we all know who Rachel Dolezal is. Back in 2015, she was a completely Caucasian woman that just decided she was black, and then, identified as a black person for a very long time until it came out that she actually was a white chick. And, a lot of people got all up in arms about that. Got really mad, and it cost her a lot of grief. And then there's another in this article also, it talks about a German model named Martina Adams, who, as you can see here in the picture, is, I think she's a woman. I don't think she's transgendered plus transracial. I think she's just transgendered. Yeah. Even though as a black woman here, she looks a little bit transgender because that's a really unflattering little picture of her. Either way, she's unflattering. But she's got huge honkers, and I guess she's going to go in for to see her surgeon, and it's probably to reduce those bad boys because she's got back problems. They could give her back problems. But and then there was this guy, Ja Du, right? Who he was that guy that way back in the day. Not way back in the day, but he said he associated more or connected more with the Filipino community. So he is transracial from white to a Filipino. And then you have this guy down here is another one whose name was Anthony Undeo Lenin. And he had been benefiting, I guess, or he was, he describes himself as an African born again, claiming that although I'm white with white parents, I've gone through the struggles of a black man, a black actor. And he decided to ditch his birth name of Anthony David Lenin, opting to go with Anthony Takahara Undeo Lenin, a name he picked out of an African book. So you guys can go and read a little more on those, more, line by line, but I'm trying to speed this up because the last couple times I've done this, it's taken me a while. So these are just a few of the public stories of white people taking cultural appropriation to a whole new level. These people are questioning why society is growing to accept transgender identities, but continues to mock transracialism. They believe that race and gender are synonymous, and one should be able to change their race if they feel more aligned to that particular culture. They put forth the idea that racial fluidity is just like gender fluidity, and we shouldn't box people into racial categories just because of their ancestry. To put these opinions at bed, and I believe they probably meant to say to put these opinions to bed, these are the 3 reasons why transracial is not the new transgender and why we can't equate race with gender. Well, if we're attacking the same kind of, if we're using the same kind of logic and rationale that a person can say they can be gender fluid and they can just say one day they're a male, the next day they're a female, or I am a female trapped in a male's body or a male trapped in a female's body, and sex doesn't determine gender, then and we can switch, then then the same argument can be said for somebody who feels the same way about their race. Now, do I agree with either one of those from a scientific, logical, biological, or ancestry point of view? No, absolutely not. But if we're subscribing to the same kind of logic and rationale that is being used and being thrown at us from the transgender community, Mr. and Mrs. Transgender community, you may not pick and choose your logic and your rationale just when it suits you, is I think the point of what I'm trying to say. Now, I would like to say before I get into these three, quick disclaimer. I'm not anti-transgender people. I am not. I am juvenile transgender. I am anti-HRT, hormone replacement therapy, for young preteen children. I think once you're old enough and you are legally an adult and you can, graduate high school and you can dodge bullets for your country. And when you are an actual adult, you can make whatever decision to be whoever you want to be, whatever gender you want to be. Now, biologically speaking and scientifically and factually, well, that's a different conversation, but I don't care what you feel like you want to be. That isn't my point in talking about this. It's really never my point in talking about this at all. It's simply to talk about how the ideology that is shoved down our throats, that we have to believe this and we have to get on board and we have to use the same conclusions that the LGBT community tells us we have to and the activists tell us we have to, and the hate and shaming and aggression that comes at us when we don't or when we want to have a conversation about facts, that bothers me. But I don't care if somebody wants to be transgender. That's your decision, or gay or whatever. That's your decision. As long as it doesn't cross over and start force feeding anything to me or forcing any of your ideology upon me and making me in an authoritarian way have to agree with what you're trying to tell me is what it is. That's also, I have a problem with that. But let's look at how the transgender now moves into here. Let's look at how the transgender says that transracialism is different, right? They lay out 3 reasons to lay this at bed or to bed. They've appropriated the word transracial, not Rachel, racial. Rachel Dolezal brought the word transracial into the mainstream. We could probably say transracial. Just kidding. However, neglected to mention its true definition. So, Mr. or Mrs. transgendered person who's writing this, or activist or whoever, or, woke white person is going to tell me now what that word really means. Transracial is originally an academic term that refers to the act of adopting a child of one race or ethnic group and placing them into a family from a different or of a different race or ethnic group. So my first contention on this would say that definition sounds more like transcultural than transracial, because just you have an adoptee that's Chinese or, Somalian or whatever, and a white family or whatever other race of a family adopts them, they don't transition them into their race. They transition them into their culture and how they do things, how they eat, how they talk, what games they play, what schools they go to, what family traditions they have. They do definitely transition them into their own culture, but they don't transition them into their own race. So, because I would say race or ancestry is much like biology and chromosomal assignment. I would say it's less definite than chromosomal assignment, but I would say that it still is something that is inherited definitely from your parents. Your race is inherited from your parents, right? So yeah, I would agree with you that it's, definitely something that is pretty rock solid, your race. But like we've noticed with Elizabeth Warren, and I think I'll touch on her later on in some of my comments here, is Elizabeth Warren is 1/2000th or 1/20, whatever it is, 1/2000th Cherokee Indian, right? That's in her ancestry. That's in her DNA and me results. So there is there's more fluidity or mutability within race and ancestry than there is in biology. That's for factual sure. Anyway, it says transracial was a term that embodied children who were stuck in between two identities. It speaks to the millions of children who are denied an intimate knowledge of their birth cultures. So again, it's talking about their cultures, not so much, their race, but it's more of a transcultural thing. And are consistently born into their and are constantly torn between their multiple identities by being raised in an environment different to their own racial or ethnic backgrounds. Rachel Dolezal, Martina Adams, Jod Dew, and Anthony Lennon have not been through this experience. They haven't grown up torn between two cultures and are undermining the identities of these millions of children. Do we really think, though, that these millions of children are upset about this? Like, there's millions of transracial or transcultural children, adoptee children, so on and so forth, and that they're actually, feeling very undermined? Or do we even think do you really think they even think much about the fact that you have somebody transitioning to another race, right? Other than if they do think anything about it, then, man, these people are wacko. They're kind of crazy thinking they're a white person that's going to become a black person. That's silly. That's probably what these kids, because a lot of kids have more common sense than us adults, are thinking. I don't think they're thinking they're undermining me and they are appropriating my ethnic and cultural backgrounds, and it's very hurtful. It just doesn't seem like a kid or people, other than people that are looking to be really upset about it, are going to think much about it. But, I could be wrong. It says, and they're taking away a word that explained the experiences that these children were faced with and appropriating it for their own gain. So they're taking something away that wasn't, necessarily assigned to them through their ethnicity and through their race. They're taking that away, and they're changing that to receive gain. So I could kind of probably take that in the same way to say that this would be similar to transgender people who appropriate the other biological sex of someone else, of, let's say, a transgendered female. So a male coming down to be a transgendered female who is appropriating the female classification, and then competing in sports, right? And competing in, for college positions, for scholarships, is competing in MMA, is competing in beauty pageants, right? In powerlifting. So they're coming down and appropriating the actual biological classifications of a female and then kicking the crap out of the competition for their own gain. I would say that there's a similarity there. That's what we're doing here. We're pointing out the similarities and, in my mind, the holes in some of these arguments. Number 2, race and ethnicity is rooted in ancestry. You can't just pick and choose. I wonder if they could say that with a straight face, being that they're transgendered. I wonder if they could literally say that with a straight face. Unlike gender, which is assigned at birth, right? I mean, nothing firmly rooted in gender. It's not like it's scientific or biological or factually provable. It is obvious gender is just an arbitrarily and haphazardly assigned, classification. It's kind of like a doctor's just playing a big game of, pin the genitalia on the humanoid, right? I mean, gender is completely very arbitrary. It's not... there's nothing that nails that one down, unlike ancestry, which, again, I'm going to keep coming back to this example. Elizabeth Warren is 1/2000th or something like that amount of Cherokee Indian, and she claimed, being that the person of the people, right, the woman of the people, claimed this ancestry of her Native American ancestry, so that she could get through on it helped her in college. I don't know if it was affirmative action, but it helped her get into some colleges because she actually put down on her application that she was an Indian. Okay. She's 1/2000th or some crazy amount, right? Anyways, unlike gender, which is assigned to you at birth, again, just arbitrarily, your race or ethnicity is rooted in ancestry. And like, again, the whole Elizabeth Warren thing, if we learned anything from that, it's that is absolutely rock solid down to 2000th percentile. You can't inherit your gender. I would agree with that. You don't inherit your gender. It's assigned to you at birth, 99.98% of the time. Well, we could argue that gender and sex are different, which a lot of people like to do, but now we're just getting into semantics and a whole bunch of postmodern play with the language. Language is a construct. It doesn't mean anything. Let's just completely rewrite it so it fits our own narrative. BS. So you're right. You can't inherit your gender because it's assigned to you. But you do inherit your race, which again, yes, that's true. You do inherit your race from your parents. But you also inherit within your race a whole bunch of little seedlings of races throughout history, depending how far back you go. So again, it's less, or it's more mutable than your biology. So if anybody has an argument here of saying they could be trans whatever, transracial people have a little bit more fluidity, if you will, in being able to say that they can, agree or identify with a race than a person with a penis or a vagina has to say they can identify with a different sex. If we're being honest, the fact that these people believe that you can pick and choose parts of your ethnicity they want and later decide to revert to their whiteness is white privilege at its worst. I think we could reword that sentence to say, in the opposite, that the fact that trans people believe that they can pick and choose their gender they want and then decide to dominate biological women's sports, get Women of the Year awards, demand you call them by their subjectively decided pronouns, is transgender privilege at its worst. Just playing devil's advocate here. They have the option to decide when to carry the burdens of discrimination felt by other races, whilst also reaping the benefits by taking the money from organizations created to empower and help Black communities. They're reaping the benefits. What benefits are we talking about here? Maybe some grant money from going to a college, or again, like the Elizabeth Warren thing where she got accepted into a school because she said she was 1/2000th Cherokee Indian. There's more grant money to be divvied up. There's plenty of affirmative action programs out there. So it's not like they're taking the last one away from these people. And there's not a whole lot of transracial people that are just flooding the racial market, if you will, and taking all these things away from all these people that are, these legitimate Black or brown or Asian or whatever it may be, these POCs, these people of color. It's not like there's so many of these transracial people that they're flooding the market and taking all these opportunities away from them. One or two that have came out, and only one of them actually took advantage of it, looks like, any kind of schooling or help, monetary help or grant-wise. There's probably a handful more than that, but it's not like this widespread problem, right? So, I don't know. I think that's kind of a weak part of their argument. Rachel and Anthony Lennon both benefited financially for their decisions to go through adult life as a Black person, as did Caitlyn Jenner getting the Woman of the Year, or the high school trans track athlete that was stealing some scholarships from the biologically female athletes, or maybe like Fallon Fox did. She's an MMA transgendered female MMA athlete, right? Who's caving biological women's heads in when she fights them, literally crushing their skull when she fights them, right? Or the transgendered female high school, or the transgendered, maybe that one was, she was a female. Okay, yeah. So there was a Texas wrestler in high school that was a female who was transgendering to a male, but since she was biologically a female, she wasn't able to wrestle on the boys because they wouldn't let her wrestle on the boys, and if she would have wrestled on the boys, she would have got absolutely wrecked. But so she was wrestling other females, but she was taking hormone replacement or TRT, testosterone, and basically steroids, to transition to a male. So she was just wrecking the girl competition, just won the state championship and just wrecked everyone, right? Or maybe the transgender female powerlifters that are just crushing world records. So, Rachel and Anthony both benefited financially for their decisions to go through life as a black person. And a whole bunch of transgendered people have been benefiting also, in their fields or in their endeavors in life too. So again, it goes both ways. And again, I don't know how hugely the benefit was for either Rachel or Anthony Lennon. You'd have to see, well, how far would they have gone if they stayed white or if they claimed they were white? I mean, how much did this really affect their benefit in life? It's questionable. Meanwhile, Jadu and Martina Adams have no doubt benefited financially from the publicity gained by coming out as transracial. Again, there's plenty of benefit both financially and publicity-wise to go around when we're talking about transgendered people who have, transformed or made the switch and then came out in the media and gotten all kinds of glitz and glamour and praise and publicity and monetary reward too. So it does go both ways on that one. It says they literally robbed black people of the money they deserved and yet had the audacity to say it was fair because they felt black. So we could also say in this sentence that they literally robbed straight people of the money, scholarships, records, dignity they deserved, and yet had the audacity to say it was fair because they felt transgendered. I'm just saying, this does go both ways pretty easily on this argument. Black isn't something you can just decide to be. I think you know where I'm going with this one, but I'm going to say it anyways. Neither is your sex. Okay? Just putting it out there. You again can be transgendered. You again can do that without, I don't care. If that makes you feel happy and if that makes you feel great, that's fine. Do it. But don't try to convince me on a scientific level and on a factual level and on a biological level that you truly are a female. If you have an XY chromosome, that you truly are a female, because you're not an actual female. Now, I will even call you she or Susie or whatever your name is, because I want to be fair to you. I don't want to be a dick. Now, if you throw a fit and tell me that if I don't, you're going to throw me in jail or you're going to take my, which happens in Canada and other places of the world. So don't say that I'm being weird when I say that. There's literally, you can be thrown in jail by misgendering certain transgendered people in other parts of the world. That hasn't really fully happened here yet in America, but it's probably coming with all the whole hate speech stuff. You can definitely get kicked off of Twitter and get unpersoned and get absolutely shut down socially and just get ostracized from people and just wrecked online if you stand up for this stuff. But you can't literally be thrown in jail yet here in America, but other places you can. So that's where I draw the line, is you can't throw me in jail if I just don't really think you're a female or a male, if you're a male or a female. But if you want to be called that, fine, that's fine. I got no problem with it. You do you and let me do me, and don't force me to absolutely do you. And I came out totally wrong. I'm going to leave it in there, not edit it because it's funny. But you know what I mean, I hope. I didn't literally mean like, do you. That'd be weird. It's for me kind of gross, but there I am. I think that's a thing now too, that if guys aren't attracted to, I heard this is something that if a guy isn't, there's a term for this now where it's like if you're not attracted to a trans person, then that's in a way shaming them too or something. It's getting pretty insane. It says you can't turn around, put on some makeup, perm your hair, and assume that you're now navigating the world as a black person. nor can you simply throw on a pair of 501 jeans and a trucker hat and or a summer little skirt and shave your legs and assume that you are now biologically and factually speaking a male or female, just to be fair. And number 3, they're insulting the transgender community. The whole outlook that transracial identity is the same as transgender identity is frankly insulting to the trans community. And that's probably because it's such a perfectly close analogous comparison that it really pisses the transgender people off. Because really, when you look at this rationally and factually, like an irrational argument, logical argument, going off of your standards of what you argue for, it's a very good analogy. So that's probably why it's so insulting to you, and why you have to downplay it like this, is because it actually is a pretty good cross comparison. No pun intended. Trans people don't choose to be trans, they're born that way. Now, this is actually and factually, again, not correct. It is literally a choice. You literally are choosing to be, in 99.98% of the time, you literally are choosing to be a female or a male if you're a male or a female. And that's fine. Again, I don't care if someone's doing that, but don't try to shove down everyone's throat that it is just blatantly in black and white, not your choice, that you don't choose it, right? That it chooses you. I don't buy that argument. And science doesn't buy it either. I know that's been pushed, but that's also been debunked and then got never any kind of play or credit on the debunking of that whole theory. There is no real good medicine or scientific evidence to prove that. Anyway, trans people don't choose to be trans, they're born that way. Conflating these two identities implies that you can choose to be trans and you equally can choose to be a different race. And yes, you're right. When we are comparing these two or conflating these two together, that is exactly what it means. That if you're choosing to be trans, you're transgendered or transracial, it's pretty much the same thing. It's kind of a choice of yours. Transitioning as a trans person is a violent and painful, long and difficult process that can result in job loss, isolation, and rejection. And you know what? And totally seriously here, I'm not trying to poke fun at this. Some of it's a little funny, but in the comparison, so we laugh or we joke a little bit, but I'm sure that it is, being completely honest. And I actually do feel for the people that are going through, that struggle inside of them. That is why I think we should have an open and honest conversation on this topic, and that we should be able to treat it as the serious issue that it is, not simply say what is culturally acceptable to say in this era we are living in, meaning don't just tiptoe around the issue and be so politically correct on this that you can't have the actual discussion of facts and issues that surround this whole issue of transgenderism, because I am sure it is painful and hard and difficult and stressful, and the statistics show it. I mean, they have the highest suicide rate out of any other group. So I get it. It's not, but that's why I think we should be able to have more open, honest conversations about it, to really get to the root of what's going on. You can't compare the trans experience to some white people deciding to tan, perm, and change their names to something more African. Well, as we've kind of just went through, I do think in a lot of ways you can, actually. I don't think the transgender community wants to think of it that clearly, but I do think that is kind of you can actually compare it. There is a difference between transitioning into a new gender, which doesn't harm anyone else. And here's the thing: when they say, I don't agree with that at all, it does harm other people. Number one, your family. What about the husbands and wives that have been torn apart because, and the sons and daughters of a family where one of the parents transitions? That's actually happened, and it did tear the family apart and caused great harm, and it caused great turmoil in the family, right? Or when, for instance, like I talked about a second ago, he says it doesn't hurt anybody else. Well, okay, it doesn't hurt maybe as many other people outside of you, but it does. It definitely does. You can't say it just doesn't hurt anyone else, and close ones and loved ones to you. But also, you think about the level of depression and suicide that the trans community has is higher than any other community. I believe it's higher than PTSD vets coming back from war. And here's the other kicker on that is that your suicide rate doesn't really change much in pre or post, surgery. So people who have gotten the surgery and fully made the transition still deal with a whole hell of a lot of problems and pain and hurt inside of them. And making the transition didn't just heal all of those like they thought it was going to. And in many cases, it made it much worse. There's many documented cases where they felt even worse afterwards. And so let's talk about the real issues here, not be scared to say and not tiptoe around and say that this isn't something that should be talked about. This isn't something that should be debated and looked at. And so there's a difference between, so I'll just reread that sentence. There's a difference between transitioning into a new gender that doesn't harm anybody else and choosing to live a lie to the detriment of other people who form the oppressed group. How is a few people pretending to be a different race than they are actually really hurting anybody else or causing great detriment to this oppressed group of people? There's a handful of people that are doing this. How does that cause great detriment and harm to them, to this oppressed group, right? I don't buy that. That you're so desperate to be part of. The whole transracial concept embodies white supremacy. You could also say that the whole transgender concept embodies LGBT supremacy. You can't speak out with a differing viewpoint. You will lose your job. You will lose your standing. You'll be excoriated online for it, and you'll literally lose your career and your way of making a living by questioning it. You're targeted by by doing what I'm doing right now. I will be targeted. There's going to be people that watch this and blow me up on comments and just tell me what a bigot I am and tell me what an idiot I am and tell me how my argument doesn't make sense and tell me how I'm completely full of shit. And they're going to call me a bigot and a racist and a homophobe and all these things when that's not what I'm doing. I'm only pointing out the hypocrisy in the arguments here where trans people are saying it's not the same thing. I'm saying, no, it's pretty similar. Maybe it's not absolutely perfectly analogous to one another, but there's a whole hell of a lot of very good analogous relationship between these two. That's all I'm trying to say. Oh, man. The whole transracial concept embodies white supremacy and the fact that white people can continue to steal from the oppressed, even by pretending to be part of the community itself. So there are my thoughts on that. Now, again, I've pretty much already clearly laid it out. I will put in the article where I quoted the 99.98% statistic that shows, because the trans community likes to say that there's close to 5 million intersex in the United States. When if you actually look at the clinical and factual information on what is truly clinically an intersex person, there's only roughly 50,000 in the United States. Out of 350 plus million people, there's 50,000. So it's like 0.02% of true intersex people. And it does go against the argument made by Ann Fasha Sterling out of the Blacklist et al. Paper that was written and study that was done. But this evidence done by Dr. Leonard Sachs, I believe. Yeah, Dr. Leonard Sachs pretty much blows old Ann Fasha Sterling's study out of the water and is very much more in depth. So it'd be good for people to read that if they want to understand kind of where I got that one statistic from. It'll be in the description. But other than that, it's really not to inflame and to say that I don't like trans people or I'm a bigot. That's not it. I'm trying to say there is a culture war going on with what we can say, who we can say it to, what we can say about these people, how we can talk about facts, how we can talk about logic. And I don't have all the facts to every problem or issue or a perfect understanding of all the logic or rational arguments on this, that, and the other. But one thing I try to practice, and I don't think enough people do, is common sense. And common sense says you're either born a male or a female 99.98% of the time. And if you are wanting to transition into another sex or gender, that's your choice to do as an adult, as a grown-ass adult, and to have at it. It's your choice to love who you want to love or have sex with who you want to have sex with. And you shouldn't get judgment or hatred for that. So let's be real, and let's not throw science and biology out, and let's not demand in an authoritarian way everybody see life through our spectrum, and if not, blast them and blow them up and tear them down and take them down, which is what's happening now. And that's why I speak on these issues, because I think the culture war of words and of facts and of narratives and of past, scientific discoveries, I think a lot of those are worth holding on to and developing, and not just cutting at the root and letting them die, and then trying to rebuild the world into this perfect utopianistic social justice, politically correct landscape. That's terrible. It's authoritarian. It has quite a bit of fascist tendencies in it also. And it's something that I fight. I honestly, that's why I have my channel up. For those who wonder why I do my channel, these are one of the reasons why I do it. I want to have a counterbalance voice, and it's as small as it is, and is maybe insignificant as it is in a lot of ways. I want to be able to speak my perspective that says as a counterbalance to the craziness going on in our society and world around us. And if you like it, then please like the video and subscribe and share this video. And if you don't, I get it. Don't watch anymore then. And until next time, without fear or animus, it's SJG Perspective. And I appreciate you guys sticking around this long. My videos they're getting long, so I apologize. But until next time, we'll talk to you when we talk to you, and have a great night. See you later. Bye.